40 minutes ago Daniel Whitmore had everything: money, power, and control. Now, soaked in rain, he stood on a city bus, unable to pay a $3 fare. As the driver ordered him off, a small homeless girl in a worn, oversized coat quietly stepped forward, counted out her last coins and paid for him. That simple act of kindness left Daniel shaken, because for the first time in his life, someone helped him without wanting anything in return. And when he later discovered who that girl really was and how she lived, it would break him. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, subscribe and stay, because what happens next is unforgettable. The November rain fell sideways that evening, driven by wind that turned umbrellas inside out and sent pedestrians scrambling for cover. Daniel Whitmore stood at the intersection of Pine and 7th, his cashmere overcoat plastered to his skin, his mind still trying to process what had happened in the last 40 minutes. 40 minutes ago, Daniel Whitmore had been a venture capitalist worth north of $200 million, walking toward his Mercedes after a board meeting where he'd approved the liquidation of a manufacturing company. 300 jobs erased with a signature, all in the name of maximizing shareholder value. Now his wallet, phone, and car keys, his entire identity, neatly contained in a leather billfold, belonged to whoever had shoved him against a wall in the parking garage and vanished into the rain. The mugger had been young, maybe 17, maybe younger. Desperate eyes, shaking hands, a knife that looked more terrifying to the person holding it than to Daniel. The whole thing had taken less than 30 seconds. Hand over the wallet, hand over the phone, keys too. Then the kid was gone, swallowed by the November darkness, leaving Daniel alone with the sudden shocking realization that without his possessions, he had no way to prove who he was. The number 47 bus wheezed to a stop, its brakes screaming in protest. Daniel climbed the steps, water pooling at his feet, leaving tracks across the rubber mat. $3, the driver said without looking up, eyes fixed on the schedule clipboard in front of him. I was mugged. Everything's gone. My wallet, my phone, everything. I need to get to Riverside Heights. I can have someone meet the bus with money. I'm Daniel Whitmore. I sit on the board of $3 or you walk. I got a schedule to keep. The driver's voice was flat, bureaucratic, final. He'd heard every excuse, every sob story, every desperate plea. None of them changed the fare. Daniel looked down the aisle. Every seat was taken. Tired faces returning from minimum wage jobs. Blank stares from people too exhausted to care about a well-dressed man's problems. Students with headphones blocking out the world. Mothers with sleeping children in their laps. The weight of long days etched into features that wouldn't meet his eyes. He opened his mouth to explain who he was, what he did, the influence he wielded in this city, then realized with devastating clarity that none of it mattered. Without his wallet, without proof, without the trappings of wealth and power, he was nobody. Just another person in wet clothes asking for something he couldn't pay for. The emptiness of that realization hit him like a physical blow. For 3 years since Emma died, he'd buried himself in work, in deals, in the machinery of wealth accumulation. He'd told himself it was necessary, that building empires gave his life meaning, that success could somehow fill the hole his 7-year-old daughter had left when leukemia took her. But standing on that bus in wet clothes, unable to pay $3, he felt the truth. He'd been running from grief so hard that he'd forgotten how to be human. His wife Jennifer had seen it happening. You're disappearing, she'd said 6 months after Emma's funeral. You're right here in front of me, but you're not really here. You're somewhere else, somewhere I can't reach you. She'd left 3 months later. He hadn't fought it, hadn't fought for anything, except the next deal, the next acquisition, the next number in his portfolio. Please, he heard himself say. The word felt foreign in his mouth, rusty from disuse. I just need help. The driver reached for the door lever, ready to send Daniel back into the rain. That's when a voice called out from somewhere near the middle of the bus. Hold on, I'll cover it. A girl stood up, small, maybe 10 or 11, wearing a donated winter coat that swallowed her frame. She navigated the crowded aisle with practiced ease, one hand gripping seat backs for balance, the other fishing coins from her pocket. When she reached the fare box, she counted out $3 in quarters, dimes and nickels, the slow, deliberate count of someone who knew the value of every cent, someone for whom $3 represented a significant sacrifice. There, he's paid. The driver grunted acknowledgement and waved Daniel aboard. Daniel stood frozen, humiliation burning through him like acid. This clearly homeless child, with patches on her jeans and duct tape holding her sneakers together, had just saved him. The girl was already heading back to her seat, not waiting for thanks, not expecting recognition for what she'd done. Daniel followed her, gripping handrails as the bus lurched forward, his expensive leather shoes squelching with each step. When he reached her seat, she was staring out the rain-streaked window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Something about her reminded him of Emma, not her appearance, but her self-possession. Emma had that same quality of existing fully in herself, needing nothing from anyone else. That same old wisdom in young eyes. "I need to thank you," Daniel said, lowering himself into the seat across from her. "That was incredibly kind. If you give me your information, I'll pay you back 10 times over, 20 times, whatever you need. Don't want it back." Her voice was flat, matter of fact, with no trace of pride or false modesty, and definitely don't want 10 times anything. "I just saw someone who needed help." Daniel suddenly became aware of how ridiculous he must look. Expensive coat, designer watch still gleaming on his wrist, shoes that cost more than some people made in a week, saved by a child who clearly survived on next to nothing. The incongruity was almost obscene. "I'm Daniel, okay. Can I at least know your name?" The girl turned to look at him then. Her eyes were old, too old for a face that young. Eyes that had seen things, endured things, survived things that most adults never had to face. "Harper, and you can know my name, but that doesn't mean you know me. So don't start thinking you do just because I paid your bus fare." There was no hostility in her words, just clarity. A boundary drawn with the confidence of someone who'd learned early that kindness and familiarity were different things, that helping someone didn't create obligation or relationship unless both parties wanted it. "Fair enough," Daniel said, respecting the line she'd drawn. "But I'd still like to understand why you helped me. You don't know me. That money clearly meant something to you." Most people would have looked the other way. Harper shrugged, turning back to the window. "People need help sometimes. If you got something to give and someone needs it, you give it. Not everything needs a reason beyond that. Saw you standing there getting all desperate with the driver. Figured you needed the help more than I needed $3 today. You say that like you might need it more tomorrow. Might not. That's tomorrow's problem." They rode in silence for several blocks. Daniel studied the city through the windows, neighborhoods he'd invested in, but never actually visited, streets his portfolio had gentrified without him ever walking them, communities his decisions had shaped from comfortable conference rooms, 40 floors above the reality of their lives. He'd approved the demolition of affordable housing to make way for luxury condos. He'd backed development projects that displaced long-term residents. He'd calculated returns on investment without ever calculating the human cost. Emma would have been 12 now, he thought. She would have looked at him with the same direct gaze Harper had, would have called him out on his distance from the world. His daughter had always seen through pretense, had always demanded honesty even when honesty was uncomfortable. "Daddy, why do people sleep outside?" she'd asked once, seeing a homeless man on their way to her dance recital. "Don't they have homes?" And he'd given her some bullshit answer about choices and consequences, about how people ended up where they ended up because of decisions they'd made. Even at 6 years old, Emma had looked skeptical. And then she'd died, and he'd spent 3 years pretending he was fine, that work could fill the hole she'd left behind, that if he just made enough money or closed enough deals, or accumulated enough power, the grief would somehow become manageable. "This your regular route?" Daniel asked eventually, needing to break the silence. "Sometimes, depends where I'm going." "Where are you going tonight?" "Wherever I end up, haven't decided yet." The casual way she said it sent a chill through Daniel that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. "You don't have somewhere you need to be, somewhere you're expected?" Harper looked at him with those ancient eyes. "Nope. And before you start getting all worried and wanting to help, I'm fine. I know how to take care of myself, have been for a while now." Daniel wanted to argue, to insist that a child shouldn't have to take care of herself, that someone should be responsible for her, that the system should be protecting her. But something in Harper's expression stopped him. She wasn't asking for rescue, she wasn't asking for anything. She'd offered help, not requested it. And there was a quiet dignity in that distinction. The bus slowed for Harper's stop. She stood adjusting her oversized coat, pulling it tight against the wind that would hit her when the doors opened. "Where will you sleep tonight?" Daniel found himself asking. Harper paused, seemed to debate whether to answer. Trust wasn't something she gave easily. That much was clear. Finally she said, "There's an old warehouse on Grant Street. Loading dock stays dry even in heavy rain. I've got a spot there. It's not the Ritz but it works. That's not safe. A child sleeping in an abandoned warehouse. Safer than some places I've been." She started down the aisle, then stopped and looked back at him, studying his face like she was making some kind of calculation. "You got somewhere to go. You were pretty lost back there." Daniel thought about his penthouse apartment with its river view and imported marble countertops. Thought about explaining to building security that he'd lost his key card, about the complicated process of proving he was who he claimed to be without any documentation. Thought about standing in that empty apartment surrounded by expensive furniture and deafening silence, another night of pretending he was fine, pretending his life had meaning beyond the numbers in his accounts. The thought exhausted him. "I'll figure it out," he said. Harper studied him for a moment longer. "Grant Street, loading dock on the east side. Entrance is around back through the fence gap. If you really got nowhere and you're not some creep, I'll show you where it's dry, just for tonight. But you try anything weird and I got friends who'll make you regret it." Then she was gone, vanishing into the rain before Daniel could respond. Daniel did go home that night. He explained his situation to building security, endured their skepticism and barely concealed contempt. Money could buy a lot of things, but apparently not the benefit of the doubt when you showed up soaking wet without ID. He called his assistant Diane from the front desk phone. She arrived 20 minutes later with his spare keys and his spare credit card, already in crisis management mode, canceling cards, filing police reports, arranging replacements for everything he'd lost. "You should file an insurance claim," Diane said as they rode the elevator to his penthouse. "And we should review security protocols. This shouldn't have happened in that garage. I'll have a word with building management." "Diane." Daniel stopped her. "It's fine, I'm fine. The kid needed money more than I needed that wallet." Diane looked at him strangely. In 12 years of working together through market crashes and hostile takeovers and the devastating loss of his daughter, she'd never heard him express anything resembling empathy for a mugger. But as Daniel stood in his apartment looking out at the city lights reflecting off wet pavement, he couldn't stop thinking about Harper. About how easily she'd given away money she needed. About the warehouse on Grant Street where a child was sleeping alone. About the matter-of-fact way she'd offered him shelter when he had nowhere to go. About Emma, who would have been horrified to know her father had spent 3 years so disconnected from reality that a random mugging was his first genuine human interaction in months. He'd built a career on calculated risks, on seeing opportunities others missed, on making strategic investments that generated maximum returns. But he'd stopped seeing people. They'd become demographic data, market segments, theoretical beneficiaries of his investment strategies. Abstractions in reports rather than human beings with names and faces and stories. Harper was the first person in years who'd felt completely uncomfortably real. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Daniel lay in his bed, a bed that cost more than most people made in 3 months, and thought about a child sleeping on a loading dock. Thought about the $3 she'd given away. Thought about the casual way she'd said that's tomorrow's problem, like uncertainty and insecurity were just facts of life to be managed rather than catastrophes to be avoided. The next morning, Daniel did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He cleared his entire calendar. Every meeting, every call, every obligation. Diane thought he was having a breakdown. "You have the Riverside Development call at 9, she reminded him. "The Thompson acquisition at 11, the quarterly review at 2. These are critical. Cancel them all." "Daniel, I don't think you understand. The Thompson deal alone is worth $40 million. I understand perfectly. Cancel them. Reschedule. I don't care. I have something more important to do." He went to find Harper. The warehouse district was exactly what he'd expected. Abandoned buildings with broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, the skeletal remains of industries that had moved overseas or gone bankrupt a decade ago. The kind of neighborhood that appeared in his investment reports as opportunity zones for redevelopment. The kind of neighborhood where real people currently lived that would be displaced by whatever luxury condos his firm eventually financed. The loading dock Harper had mentioned was tucked behind a rusted fence with a gap just wide enough to squeeze through. Daniel's expensive coat caught on the metal, tearing slightly. He didn't care. He found her sitting on a concrete ledge, eating a granola bar and reading a water-damaged paperback with half its cover torn off. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, unsurprised. "You actually came." Harper didn't sound impressed, just resigned, like she'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. "I wanted to check on you, make sure you were okay." "I'm fine. Same as I was yesterday. Same as I'll be tomorrow." Daniel sat down nearby, careful to maintain distance, careful not to invade her space. Up close in daylight he could see more details. The dark circles under her eyes that spoke of irregular sleep, the way her clothes hung loose like she'd lost weight recently, the small scar on her left hand that looked like it had healed without medical attention. "How long have you been living like this?" he asked. "Living like what?" "I'm living. That's all that matters." "You know what I mean. How long have you been on your own?" Harper set down her book with careful deliberation, turned to face him directly, making a decision about whether he was worth the truth. "Since I was 8, my mom died, cancer. Pancreatic. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. Dad couldn't handle it. Started using pain pills at first, then harder stuff when the pills stopped working. I went into foster care when the school reported bruises, but foster care was worse in different ways." She said it all in the same flat tone, like she was reading a grocery list rather than recounting trauma that would break most adults. "What do you mean, worse in different ways?" "Different families, different rules, different people who said they cared but really just wanted the monthly check. Some were okay, some weren't. I kept running. They'd place me somewhere new, I'd give it a few weeks, then I'd leave. Eventually they stopped trying so hard. Been on my own about 3 years now. 3 years last month actually." The casual way she delivered her tragedy hit Daniel harder than any business setback ever had. Cancer. Just like Emma. This child had lost her mother the same way he'd lost his daughter, and somehow she'd survived 3 years alone while he'd had every resource imaginable and still nearly drowned in grief. "Jesus, Harper. I'm so sorry. No child should have to go through that." "Don't be sorry. Being sorry doesn't change anything. It is what it is. I'm alive, I'm healthy enough, I know how to survive. That's more than some people have. But you're 11 years old. You should be in school, living with a family who loves you, having a normal childhood, playing with friends, worrying about homework, not." He gestured at the warehouse, at the concrete ledge, at the visible reality of her life, "not this." "Should is a useless word." Harper interrupted, her voice sharp for the first time. "Should doesn't change what is. Should doesn't put food in my stomach, or a roof over my head. Should is what people say when they want to feel better about not actually doing anything. You want to help? Stop telling me what my life should look like and start asking what would actually make it better." Daniel sat back, stung by the truth of her words. How many times had he sat in meetings, telling people what they should want, what they should do with the resources he provided? How many times had he confused his vision of how the world should work with the reality of how it actually did work? How many times had he used should to avoid the harder work of actually listening? "Okay," he said quietly. "You're right, I'm sorry. What would make your life better, really better, not theoretically better?" Harper was quiet for a long moment, watching a pigeon pick at trash near the fence. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "A place that doesn't have a million rules. Shelters, they want you to fit their system. Wake up at 6 sharp, lights out at 9, mandatory group meetings where you're supposed to share your feelings with strangers, counselors asking you invasive questions about your trauma, social workers trying to fix you, turn you into the right kind of person so you can fit back into society. I get that they mean well, but it's like, they care more about what you're supposed to become than who you actually are right now. What would you want instead? Just a place that's safe, where you can come and go without someone interrogating you about where you've been, where you can sleep without worrying someone's gonna steal your stuff or hurt you while you're vulnerable, where the people running it treat you like a person instead of a problem to solve, where you don't have to pretend you're getting better or fixing yourself or becoming someone else just to deserve basic safety." She looked at him directly. "But nobody builds places like that. There's no grant money in just letting people be. Funders want measurable outcomes, success metrics, before and after stories. They want transformation, not just dignity." Daniel felt something shift inside him, an idea taking shape, dangerous and compelling. Perhaps this was what Emma would have wanted. Not for him to bury himself in work, not for him to accumulate more wealth, but to do something that actually mattered. Something human. Something real. What if someone did build it, he asked. That kind of place you're describing. Would you go there? Depends. Would I have to stay? Would there be rules about behavior and curfews and mandatory participation in programs? What if there weren't? What if it was exactly what you described, safe, respectful, no pressure to be anything except who you are? Harper's eyes narrowed, suspicion flooding back. Why are you asking me this? Because I've spent 20 years building things that make money. Lots of money. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And I'm realizing I don't actually know how to build things that matter, but you do. You know what people need because you need it yourself. You know what works and what doesn't because you've lived it. So what, you want to build some kind of shelter and have me be your poster child? The success story you parade around to donors. Prove that rich people care about poor kids. No. Daniel said firmly. God, no. I want to build something real. And I want you to tell me if what I'm building is actually helpful or just another version of what doesn't work. You wouldn't be my project. You'd be my consultant. My partner in this. The expert who keeps me honest. Harper studied him for a long time, those old eyes searching his face for signs of manipulation or false promises, or the kind of savior complex that made people feel good but didn't actually help anyone. You're serious about this, she said finally. I think I am. Yes. Then you need to understand something. Harper leaned forward, her voice intense. If we do this, you don't get to pat yourself on the back and walk away. You don't get to build something pretty, cut a ribbon, get some good press, and go back to your comfortable life, feeling like you made a difference. If you start this, you're all in. You show up, you listen, you keep listening even when what you hear is uncomfortable. Because these kids like me, we've had enough people start things and give up when it gets hard. When we don't transform fast enough, or when we're not grateful enough, or when we mess up because we're human and traumatized and still learning how to trust. You need to be prepared for that. I understand, do you? Because I'm gonna hold you to this. If you build something and it turns into just another place that looks good on paper but doesn't actually help the people it's supposed to serve, I'll call you on it. Publicly if I have to. I don't care about protecting your reputation or making you look good. I care about whether this thing is real. Daniel extended his hand, meeting her eyes directly. Deal. Hold me accountable. Please, I need that. Harper shook it, her small hand disappearing in his, but her grip surprisingly firm. All right then. Let's build something real. But first you need to actually understand what you're building for, which means you need to spend some time living in this reality, not just visiting it. Over the next 6 weeks, Daniel Whitmore got an education that his MBA from Harvard and his 20 years in venture capital had never provided. Harper became his guide to a world that existed in the gaps and margins of the city he thought he knew. She introduced him to Jordan, 19 years old, who'd aged out of foster care at 18 with $200 in his pocket and a garbage bag full of belongings. Jordan worked 40 hours a week at a grocery store, making just above minimum wage, but couldn't afford an apartment because landlords wanted first month, last month, and security deposit, nearly $4,000, he'd never be able to save when every paycheck went to food, his car payment, and the gym membership he maintained just to have access to showers. He'd been sleeping in his car for 2 years, parking in different locations each night to avoid police harassment, keeping his work clothes in dry cleaning bags so they wouldn't wrinkle. People see the car, and they think I'm doing okay, Jordan explained, showing Daniel the carefully organized back seat that served as bedroom, closet, and storage unit. They don't understand that I'm one breakdown away from losing everything. No car means no way to get to work. No work means no money for food. It all falls apart so fast. She introduced him to Carmen, 16, who'd fled an abusive stepfather and refused to go back no matter how many times. Child Protective Services tried to return her. She'd stayed in youth shelters for a while, but aged out of most programs at 15 when she wouldn't cooperate with reunification efforts. Now she couch-surfed with friends from school, moving every few weeks when parents got tired of the extra mouth to feed or started asking too many questions. The system acts like family is always better than being alone, Carmen said bitterly. But they weren't there when he came into my room at night. They didn't see the bruises, they just saw a rebellious teenager who wouldn't obey authority. So I stopped playing their game. I'd rather sleep on couches and take my chances than go back there. She introduced him to Marcus, 11 years old like Harper, who'd been separated from his migrant parents during a workplace immigration raid 9 months ago. His parents had been deported, he'd been placed in foster care. The system couldn't figure out how to reunite them across international borders, so Marcus existed in bureaucratic limbo, not quite adoptable, not quite reunifiable, just stuck. His foster family was kind enough, but overwhelmed with 5 other kids. Marcus spent most of his time alone, invisible, waiting for a solution that might never come. Each person had a story. Each story revealed layers of system failure that Daniel had never considered. And each conversation stripped away another layer of his comfortable assumptions about poverty, homelessness, and what it meant to need help. The thing is, Harper explained one evening as they sat in a 24-hour diner where she sometimes bought coffee just to have somewhere warm to sit for a few hours, nobody wants to admit that sometimes the system is the problem. It's easier to believe people are homeless because they made bad choices, because they're lazy or addicted or mentally ill. Then you can tell yourself they deserve it, or at least that you don't have to feel too guilty about it. But that's not what I'm seeing, Daniel said, his notebook filled with observations and stories. Every person you've introduced me to is trying. Jordan works full-time. Carmen goes to school. Marcus does his homework every night. They're doing everything they're supposed to do. The system just isn't set up for their reality. Exactly. The system is designed for a version of poverty that doesn't really exist, where people just need a little help to get back on their feet, where a few months of support will solve everything, where everyone fits neatly into categories and programs. But real poverty is complicated. Real trauma doesn't heal on a timeline. Real people don't fit into neat boxes. So if you're gonna build something, it needs to be built for reality, not for what people wish reality was. Daniel pulled out his notebook. Tell me what reality looks like for you. What's an average day? Harper sipped her coffee, refilled 3 times now by a waitress who'd stopped charging after the first cup, a small kindness that made a difference. Wake up whenever, unless something wakes me first, sirens, other people, rats. Find somewhere to clean up. Library bathroom's good if I can get there when it opens. They don't ask questions if you're quick and you bring your own soap. Then figure out food. Sometimes there's church groups with breakfast, sometimes I buy something cheap, make it last all day, sometimes I just don't eat much. Then find somewhere to be during the day. Library's good, some coffee shops if you buy something. Parks when it's warm. Spend the time reading, staying warm, staying safe, staying invisible. Visible attracts attention. Attention means questions. Questions mean problems. Then when it gets dark, find somewhere to sleep. Check if it's safe, if anyone else is using it, if it's gonna be dry. Then wake up and do it again. What's the hardest part? Daniel asked, writing rapidly. Harper was quiet for a moment. The exhaustion. Not just physical, though that too, but emotional, mental. You're always on alert, always scanning for danger, always aware that you don't belong anywhere, that someone could tell you to leave at any time, that you're one bad encounter away from real trouble. You can never relax, never let your guard down, never feel safe enough to just be. It wears you down in ways people don't see. Daniel wrote that down, underlining it twice. So what this place needs to provide, more than anything, is safety, not just physical safety, walls and locks, but emotional safety, psychological safety, permission to exist without constantly justifying yourself or proving you deserve to be there. Yeah, that Harper looked at him with something that might have been hope, fragile and cautious. You're actually getting it. Most people don't. They think homeless people need food and shelter, and yeah, we do, but we also need dignity, respect, the right to make our own choices even if they're not the choices other people would make, the right to be human without having to earn it. Over the following weeks, Daniel did something revolutionary for a man who'd built his career on talking and directing and making decisions. He listened. really listened, not just to Harper but to the entire community she introduced him to. He met with social workers and advocates, reading reports and studies. He consulted with people who'd been homeless and weren't anymore, asking what had actually helped versus what had just felt like help. He sat in on support groups and listened to stories of trauma and survival and resilience that put his own grief in perspective. And slowly, a vision took shape, not a shelter in the traditional sense, not a group home with house parents and rules, something different. Something that honored autonomy while providing structure, something that met people where they were instead of where society thought they should be. By mid-December, Daniel was ready to move forward. "I want to show you something," he told Harper, one cold afternoon, when frost clung to every surface. He drove her across town to an old community recreation center that had been vacant for 3 years. The building sat on a corner lot, solid red brick with good bones, high ceilings and large windows that let in natural light even on gray winter days. It had been built in the 1930s as a community gathering place, hosted everything from youth basketball to senior citizen potlucks, to voting booths on election days. But budget cuts had closed it down, and it had sat empty ever since, slowly deteriorating while the city tried to figure out what to do with it. "It's for sale," Daniel said, as they walked through the empty, echoing spaces. "I'm thinking of buying it, for the project. For what we've been talking about." Harper moved through the room slowly, her footsteps echoing off walls that still bore faded motivational posters and basketball tournament brackets from 3 years ago. She studied the layout with a critical eye, already envisioning how the space could be transformed. "This could work," she said finally. "It's big enough for private spaces but small enough to still feel like a home instead of an institution. Good location too, 3 blocks from the bus line, walking distance to that clinic on 4th that doesn't ask for ID or insurance, 2 blocks from the library, close to that church that does meals on Wednesdays. Kids could get what they need without having to travel across the city." "What would you change about the layout?" Daniel asked, notebook ready. Harper walked from room to room thinking out loud. "Kitchen needs to be bigger, way bigger, and accessible all the time, not just certain hours. People need to eat when they're hungry, not when the schedule says it's mealtime. Plus cooking is therapeutic for some people. Gives them something to control when everything else feels out of control." Daniel wrote it down. "Bedrooms should have windows." "I know that sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many youth facilities stick kids in tiny windowless rooms because it's cheaper or easier to supervise. Natural light matters, being able to see outside matters, knowing you can leave if you need to matters." More notes. "There should be common spaces for when people want to be social, but also quiet spaces. Private spaces where someone can just sit alone without anyone bothering them, or asking if they're okay. Sometimes you need people around, sometimes you need to be alone. Both should be possible." "What about bathrooms?" Harper walked to what had been the recreation center's locker rooms. "These are actually good, already set up for multiple people. But you need to add privacy stalls to the showers, not just curtains, actual walls and doors. People need to feel safe when they're vulnerable, and you need some bathtubs, not just showers. Showers are efficient, but baths are healing. Especially if someone's been sleeping rough and their muscles are all cramped and sore." "What about staff? How should they interact with residents?" "You need to hire people who actually understand what this is about," Harper said firmly. "Not just people with degrees in social work, though some of that is fine, but people who've been there. People who know what it feels like to be homeless or traumatized or not fit into the system. People who won't judge, who won't treat residents like problems to fix or projects to manage. Would you help me find them? Maybe, if you're serious about this, if you're really gonna build what we've been talking about, and not just another shelter with a different name." "I'm serious." Daniel stopped walking, turned to face her directly. "Harper, I need you to know something. I'm not doing this to feel better about myself. I'm not trying to fix my guilt, or build my legacy or get good press. I'm doing this because you changed how I see the world, and I can't go back to not seeing. Because my daughter would have wanted me to do something that matters, and this matters more than anything I've ever done in my entire career." Harper was quiet for a moment. "You had a daughter, Emma." She died 3 years ago. She was 7. Leukemia, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. 11 months from diagnosis to the end. Understanding flooded Harper's face, softening her perpetual weariness. That's why you get it. Why you're not treating me like a charity case or a project. You know what loss feels like, what it's like when everything that matters gets taken away. Yeah, I do. Daniel's voice caught, emotion breaking through the professional veneer he usually maintained. And I've been running from it for 3 years, building deals, making money, pretending I was fine, but I wasn't fine. I was empty, hollow, just going through motions. And then you paid my bus fare, and for the first time since Emma died, I felt something real, something human. You reminded me that people matter, that kindness matters, that there are things worth caring about beyond balance sheets and profit margins. Harper reached out and took his hand, a simple gesture that meant everything. Okay, let's build this. For Emma. For all the kids who need a place to just be. Let's make it real. Diane, Daniel's assistant of 12 years, had seen him through multiple market crashes, 2 failed acquisitions that cost the firm millions, and the devastating illness and death of his daughter. When he told her he was buying an abandoned recreation center to create housing for homeless youth, she didn't even blink. How much do you need in the initial budget, was all she asked, her pen poised over her notepad. I don't know yet. Maybe $2 million for acquisition and renovation. Maybe more. I'll set up a separate account. You'll want this completely independent from your other business ventures. Different legal structure, different accounting, different everything. Do you want to set it up as a non-profit? Daniel looked at Harper, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner of his office taking in this conversation. What do you think? Non-profit means oversight, Harper said. Board of Directors, annual reports, transparency about how money's spent. That's good, keeps things honest. But it also means restrictions on what you can do, rules about governance, reporting requirements. You ready for that? I think transparency is important, Daniel said. I want people to trust this, trust that it's real and not just some vanity project. Then non-profit, Harper agreed. But you need to build a board that actually cares about the mission, not just people who look good on paper. Within 2 weeks, Diane had assembled a team, architects willing to work with unconventional design requirements, contractors with experience in community spaces, lawyers to navigate the complex regulations around youth housing, social workers to advise on best practices, and former residents of youth facilities to provide lived experience perspective. Daniel brought Harper to every meeting. At first the professionals were skeptical. What could an 11-year-old girl contribute to a serious construction project? What did a homeless child know about building codes and zoning regulations, and fire safety requirements? Then Harper started talking, and their skepticism evaporated. This doorway, she said during the first design meeting, pointing to the architect's preliminary sketches. It needs to be wider, not for wheelchair accessibility, though that too, but because when you're carrying everything you own you need space. You need to be able to see what's on the other side before you commit to walking through. Narrow doorways feel like traps when you're used to having to run. The architect made a note, nodding slowly. The bedrooms can't have locks on the doors from the outside, only from the inside. The second you put a lock on the outside, this becomes a prison instead of a home. People need to know they can leave whenever they want, that they're choosing to stay, not being forced. The contractor nodded, crossing out a line in his plans. Bathrooms need to have both showers and baths. I know showers are cheaper and take up less space, but baths matter. When you've been sleeping outside and your whole body hurts, when you're carrying stress in every muscle, being able to soak in hot water is healing. It's not a luxury, it's medicine. The plumber made sketches calculating the additional plumbing required. One by one, Harper's insights transformed the standard youth housing model into something different, something that treated its future residents as people with agency and needs and dignity instead of problems to contain and manage. Windows in every bedroom, Harper continued. Natural light, being able to see outside, knowing what time it is, what the weather's doing, that you're still connected to the world. You'd be surprised how many facilities put kids in windowless rooms like they're in prison. Kitchen needs to be commercial grade but accessible to residents, not locked away for staff only. Cooking is control. When everything else in your life feels chaotic, being able to make yourself food exactly how you want it matters. Plus it teaches skills. Plus it's cheaper than having staff cook every meal. Plus it builds community when people cook together. Common spaces, yes, but also quiet spaces. A library corner with comfortable chairs and good lighting. A room where someone can just sit and think without anyone asking if they're okay or trying to engage them in activities. Sometimes people need to be alone. That should be respected, not treated as antisocial behavior. The architect started sketching faster, his initial plans transforming before their eyes. Laundry facilities that are free, not coin-operated. Free, because doing laundry shouldn't cost money when you don't have money. And the machines need to be good ones that actually work, not the cheap ones that break down constantly. Clean clothes are dignity. Art supplies, music equipment, sports stuff, not as rewards for good behavior but just available. Because people need ways to express themselves, to process emotions, to do something besides survive. By the end of that first meeting, the architect had completely revised his approach. "I've designed 5 youth facilities," he said to Daniel as they packed up. "And not one of them was built with this level of respect for the actual users. She's remarkable." Construction began in early January with a target completion date of late May. Harper visited the site almost daily after school. She'd enrolled in the alternative education program at the public library where she could work at her own pace and didn't have to answer too many questions about her living situation. She'd watch the workers gut the old rec center, removing decades of accumulated debris and outdated infrastructure. She'd offer suggestions when asked, and sometimes when not asked. The construction crew learned quickly that this 11-year-old girl knew more about what made a space livable than most architects they'd worked with. "Why are you putting the electrical outlets so high?" Harper asked one afternoon, watching an electrician work. "Standard height, 4 feet off the floor. That's hard to reach for kids. And for people who might need to charge phones while sitting on the floor because they don't have furniture yet. Put some lower, like 1 foot off the floor in the bedrooms." The electrician looked to the foreman. The foreman looked to Daniel. Daniel nodded. "She's the expert. Do what she says." Word of the project spread through the community. The first news article appeared in February in the local alternative weekly, "Venture Capitalist Turns Community Center into Youth Haven." It was cautiously optimistic, focusing on Daniel's genuine listening approach and Harper's central role in the design process. The second article came in March in the city's major newspaper, more skeptical in tone. "Another rich man's charity project." Questions surround Whitmore's youth housing initiative. It questioned whether a venture capitalist who'd made his fortune gentrifying neighborhoods and displacing low-income residents could genuinely create something helpful. It asked why anyone should trust a man who'd spent 20 years maximizing profit to suddenly care about homeless youth. By April, the criticism had sharpened. Blog posts and social media commentary picked apart every aspect of the project. Daniel Whitmore's redemption arc, sincere or self-serving, the problematic savior complex of Haven House, why we should be skeptical of billionaire charity projects. Some of the criticism was thoughtful, raising legitimate questions about power dynamics and whether elite charity could ever address systemic problems. Some was simply cynical, assuming bad faith because believing in genuine change was more uncomfortable than maintaining skepticism. The articles that hit Daniel hardest were the ones that questioned his relationship with Harper. Inappropriate closeness. One headline suggested, noting how much time a wealthy adult man spent with a homeless child, how central she was to his project, whether there might be something predatory hiding behind the philanthropic facade. Daniel tried to ignore the commentary, but it got under his skin, fed his doubts, made him question his own motives in ways that kept him awake at night. It was Harper who confronted him about it when she found him in what would become the Haven Library, staring at his phone, reading the comments sections of articles about him. "You're doing it again, reading what people say about you, they're saying I'm using you, that this whole thing is about making myself look good, that I'm some kind of predator." Harper grabbed the phone from his hand, set it face down on a pile of lumber. "So what? Let them say it. People who don't understand what we're doing will always find reasons to tear it down. That's easier than believing something good might actually be happening. But what if they're right? What if I am doing this just to feel better about myself?" To ease my guilt about Emma, about all the money I've made, about all the harm I've caused over the years. Are you? Daniel thought about it honestly, sitting on a sawdust-covered floor in an unfinished building, having a conversation with an 11-year-old that felt more real than any board meeting he'd ever attended. I don't know anymore, he admitted. It started because you helped me and I wanted to do something meaningful, because Emma died and I needed purpose, needed to feel like my life had value beyond making money. But now I care about this, about getting it right, about creating something that actually helps. Is that doing it for myself or for others? Can it be both? It's always both, Harper said simply, sitting down next to him. That's what people don't get. Good things can come from mixed motives. You can care about something and also feel good about caring. That doesn't make it fake or selfish, it just makes you human. When did you get so wise? I've always been this wise. You're just now paying attention. The breakthrough came in early May, 2 weeks before the scheduled opening. A local journalist named Patricia Morrison, who'd been following the story from the beginning, asked to interview Harper directly, not as Daniel's project or beneficiary, but as her own person with her own perspective. Harper agreed, with one condition: Daniel couldn't be in the room. This had to be her voice, not filtered through his presence or influence. The article that resulted from that interview changed everything. I want people to understand something, Harper had said, speaking with the journalist in a coffee shop while Daniel waited outside. Mr. Whitmore didn't save me. I don't need saving. What he did was listen to me. Actually listen, not just pretend to listen while already knowing what he wanted to do. He asked what would help instead of telling me what I needed. He built this place with me, not for me. That's the difference between charity and respect. The journalist had pressed her. But isn't there a power imbalance here? He's a billionaire, you're a homeless child. How do you have any real say in what gets built? Because he gave me real say, Harper had responded. I'm not just some token or mascot. I'm in every meeting. I review every design. When I say something won't work, we don't do it. When contractors push back, Mr. Whitmore backs me up. Yeah, he has the money and I don't, but he's using that money to build what I'm telling him to build. That's what power sharing actually looks like. The article continued. Everyone wants to make this about Daniel Whitmore having some kind of awakening, some Damascus Road conversion from heartless capitalist to caring philanthropist. But it's bigger than that. It's about how we treat people who don't fit into society's boxes. Are we going to keep building systems that force them to change, that make them earn dignity, that treat them like problems to solve? Or are we going to build systems that meet them where they are, that respect their autonomy, that give them safety without demanding transformation? Heaven isn't Mr. Whitmore's project, it's ours, mine, his, and every kid who's gonna live there. We're building it together. The article was shared thousands of times on social media. Donations started flooding in, small donations from regular people who saw themselves or their kids in Harper's story, who believed in what they were trying to build. Volunteers signed up to help with the final phases of construction. Other homeless youth started showing up at the site, cautious and skeptical but willing to hope that maybe this place might be different. But more importantly, the article shifted the narrative. This wasn't a story about a rich man's redemption. It was a story about what became possible when people with different kinds of power chose to work together with genuine respect. Daniel framed the article and hung it in his office at Haven. Not because it praised him, it barely mentioned him, except as Harper's partner in the project, but because it was the first time someone had truly centered Harper's voice, and her voice was worth more than all the venture capital deals he'd ever closed. Haven opened its doors on the first Saturday in June, exactly 7 months after Daniel Whitmore got mugged in a parking garage and a homeless child paid his bus fare. The building gleamed with fresh paint, not institutional white, but warm colors chosen by future residents: sage green in the common areas, soft blue in the library corner, warm yellow in the kitchen. The smell of new furniture mixed with the lingering scent of sawdust and the promise of possibility. The grand opening was deliberately ungrand. No politicians cutting ribbons, no press conferences, no photo ops with oversized checks. Just a small gathering of people who'd helped build it, the construction crew who'd listened to an 11-year-old's feedback, the architects who'd torn up their original plans, the social workers who'd advised without trying to take over, the community members who'd donated supplies and time. And the kids, Harper had insisted that any kids who wanted to attend should be able to, whether they planned to live at Haven or not, whether they had families or were homeless or somewhere in between. This was for them. They should be there. Harper stood next to Daniel on the front steps, wearing new clothes that actually fit, jeans without patches, a sweater without holes, proper winter boots, but still the same duct-taped sneakers she'd been wearing the night they met. "You should say something," Daniel told her. "Everyone's here because of you. I'm not big on speeches. You do it, neither am I. And this isn't about me. It's about what we built together, what you envisioned. People need to hear from you." Harper sighed but stepped forward, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket, notes she'd apparently written the night before, the handwriting neat despite the wrinkled paper. "Okay, so, I don't really know how to do this. Public speaking isn't my thing. But I guess I want to say that Haven matters. Not because it's perfect, it won't be. We're gonna make mistakes. People are gonna struggle here just like they struggle everywhere else. This isn't magic. It's not gonna solve everything. But it matters because it exists. Because somebody finally built a place that says you don't have to be fixed to deserve safety. You don't have to prove you're getting better, or changing, or becoming someone else to deserve basic dignity. You just have to be human. That's enough." She paused, looking out at the small crowd of maybe 40 people gathered on the lawn. "I also want to say something about Mr. Whitmore, because I think a lot of people get him wrong. Some people think he built this place to make himself feel better about being rich. Some think he's trying to buy redemption after years of doing harm in his business. Some think he's got some savior complex or weird obsession with homeless kids. All of that's wrong." Harper looked at Daniel briefly, then back at the crowd. "He built this because I paid his bus fare one night when he got mugged, and it changed how he saw people. That's it. That's the whole story. One small act of kindness from someone who had almost nothing, and he started actually paying attention to lives he'd been ignoring his whole career. Started seeing people instead of statistics. Started asking what they needed instead of telling them what they should want." She took a breath, her voice gaining strength. "So I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to help people, if you want to make a difference, just pay attention. Actually see the people around you, ask them what they need. Listen to the answer even if it's not what you expected. And if you can help, without conditions. Without needing them to transform or prove they deserve it. Just help because you can. It really is that simple." She folded the paper and put it back in her pocket. For a moment there was silence, then the crowd erupted in applause, not polite charity gala applause, but genuine appreciation from people who recognized truth when they heard it. Daniel felt tears he didn't try to hide streaming down his face. This was what Emma would have wanted. Not for him to build monuments in her name, but for him to be changed by her death in ways that mattered. Ways that helped other people. Ways that kept her memory alive not through sadness but through action. The doors opened. Haven's first resident walked through within an hour. Her name was Zoe, 14 years old, carrying everything she owned in a backpack decorated with band patches and political buttons. She'd been couch surfing for 6 months since her mom's boyfriend made it clear she wasn't welcome anymore. Suspicion and defensive anger radiated off her in waves, the armor of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to dare hope this might be different. Harper met her at the entrance, no clipboard or intake forms or official procedure, just one person greeting another. "I'm Harper, welcome to Haven." Zoe looked her up and down, taking in Harper's age, her direct gaze, the lack of fake cheerfulness or condescension that usually accompanied adult helpers. "You work here, sort of. I helped design it. Now I help run it, I guess. You must be Zoe." The social worker called ahead, said you might come by. "How did you know my name? Did she tell you all my business? My whole tragic backstory?" "She said your name and that you don't trust easy." "Which is smart, I don't either." Something in Harper's directness cut through Zoe's defenses just slightly. "So what's the catch here? What are the rules? What do I have to do to stay?" "Don't hurt people, don't steal their stuff, clean up your messes, that's about it. Everything else we figure out as we go. That's it. No curfew, no mandatory therapy sessions, no group meetings where we all sit in a circle and share our feelings, no chores schedule, no room inspections. Nope. There's therapy available if you want it. There are groups if you want to join them. People usually help with chores because they want to contribute, not because we force them. But nobody's gonna make you do anything. That's kind of the whole point. Zoe's eyes narrowed further. Why, what's your angle? No angle. This isn't a reform school or a treatment program. It's just a place to live. You get to decide what that means for you. I've heard that before. Places always say stuff like that. Then they hit you with all the real rules once you're settled in. I've been in those places too, Harper said quietly. Foster homes that promised one thing, delivered another. Shelters with hidden agendas. I know what you mean. That's why we built this different. But I get that you don't trust that yet. That's okay. You'll figure out if it's real by staying and seeing, or you won't, and you'll leave. Either way is fine. Harper showed Zoe through the building, the spacious kitchen where 2 other residents were already making lunch, the common room with comfortable furniture and a TV, the library corner with shelves already filling with donated books, the quiet room with just pillows and soft lighting, where people could decompress. Then upstairs to the bedrooms, small but private, each one with a window, a bed with clean sheets, a desk, a closet with hangers already in it. On Zoe's assigned bed was a welcome basket with basic toiletries, a journal, a pen, and a handwritten note. Welcome home, you belong here. Zoe stood in the doorway, not entering, not quite believing it was real. This is really mine, as long as you want it. You can leave tomorrow if this isn't right for you, or next week, or next month, or you can stay for a year, your choice. The only thing we ask is that you let us know you're leaving so we don't worry. But you're not trapped here, you're choosing to be here. There's a difference. Nobody's ever said that before, that I get to choose. Usually it's this is your placements or you should be grateful, or this is what's best for you, whether you like it or not. Well, Harper said, leaning against the doorframe, get used to it. Because respecting your choices is kind of our whole thing here. Even when your choices are messy or complicated or not what we'd pick for you. Zoe finally stepped into the room, setting her backpack down carefully like she was afraid it might disappear if she looked away. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you doing this? You're like 12. You could be anywhere doing anything. Why are you spending your time helping homeless kids? 11. Actually, almost 12. And I'm not helping homeless kids. Harper met her eyes directly. I am a homeless kid, was a homeless kid. Still am in some ways, even though I live here now. This isn't charity for me, it's survival. It's making sure other people don't have to go through what I went through alone. It's building the place I wish had existed when I was 8 and sleeping under bridges. Something shifted in Zoe's expression. Recognition, connection, the beginning of trust. Okay, she said softly. Okay, I'll try this. But if it gets weird or fake or controlling, I'm out. Fair enough, Harper said. Let me know if you need anything. I'm usually around. Over the following weeks more residents arrived. Each brought their own story, their own trauma, their own cautious hope that maybe this place might be different. By the end of June, Haven housed 12 young people ranging in age from 9 to 18. Each room filled, each person testing the boundaries, waiting for the rules to materialize, for the conditions to emerge, for the place to reveal itself as just another system wearing a friendlier mask. But the conditions never came. The hidden rules never materialized. Haven was exactly what Harper and Daniel had promised, a place that prioritized safety and dignity over transformation and compliance. Marcus, the 11-year-old still waiting to be reunited with his deported parents, started teaching other kids Spanish in the evenings, sitting at the kitchen table with vocabulary flashcards he'd made himself. It gave him purpose, connection, a way to hold on to his culture while everything else felt uncertain. A 16-year-old named Jasmine, who'd been in foster care since she was 5, claimed the quiet room as her sanctuary. She'd spend hours there with headphones on, journaling, processing years of accumulated trauma in her own time and way without anyone pushing her to share before she was ready. Alex, 17 and aging out of the system in 6 months, started a music project in the basement. He'd collected donated instruments from a music shop going out of business and taught himself to play 5 of them. Now he taught others, and the sound of imperfect melodies became part of Haven's daily rhythm. Harper moved through it all as both resident and guide, resident and staff, insider and bridge builder. She greeted new arrivals, mediated conflicts, reminded staff members when they started sliding into control-based thinking, kept Daniel grounded in the original vision. Daniel, for his part, learned to step back, to trust Harper's instincts, to listen more than he talked, to resist his lifelong habit of trying to fix everything, and instead just create space for people to fix themselves when and how they were ready. Diane managed the logistics, the fundraising, the paperwork, the practical details that kept Haven running. She'd become a true believer in the project, investing her own time and energy beyond what any assistant's job required. And slowly Haven became something real. Not perfect, there were conflicts and setbacks and moments of crisis, but real. A genuine community built on respect and choice rather than rules and compliance. For 4 months from June through September, Haven ran more smoothly than Daniel had dared hope. By early October, 17 kids had found their way there. Some stayed a few weeks, others settled in for longer hauls. The house developed rhythms and traditions that emerged organically. Family dinners on Sunday nights, where everyone contributed to cooking. Movie nights on Fridays, where residents took turns choosing films. Saturday morning pancakes made by whoever was up first and wanted to cook. Harper flourished in ways that sometimes took Daniel's breath away. She'd enrolled in school, a progressive charter school that appreciated her unusual life experience and independent learning style. She maintained her role at Haven, becoming the bridge between residents and staff, the one who could spot brewing conflicts before they exploded, the voice that kept everyone honest about Haven's core principles. At nearly 12 years old, she had wisdom that humbled adults twice her age and perspective that came from living through things no child should have to survive. Then one afternoon in mid-October, a man showed up asking for her. His name was Vincent Walsh, her uncle, her father's older brother, though Harper hadn't seen him since before her mother died 5 years ago. He'd spotted Haven's story in a national magazine article that featured Harper's photo prominently, read about how central she was to this well-funded youth housing project, and seen an opportunity. He found her in Haven's community garden, pulling the last of the summer tomatoes alongside Zoe and Marcus, all 3 of them laughing at some inside joke about the squirrels that kept stealing their vegetables. "Well, look at you," Vincent said, his smile not reaching his eyes, his voice carrying that particular tone of false warmth that Harper recognized instantly as danger. "All grown up and living the good life. Got yourself a real setup here." Harper stood slowly, dirt on her hands, wariness flooding back into features that had been starting to relax into something like happiness. "Vincent, what do you want?" "That's harsh, Harper. Can't your uncle visit his favorite niece? I heard about this place. Read all about it actually. Very impressive. You've really landed on your feet, made quite a name for yourself." Daniel, working in his office reviewing budget reports with Diane, came out when one of the staff members alerted him to the situation. He found Harper and Vincent in a standoff among the tomato plants, Harper's hands clenched at her sides, Zoe and Marcus hovering protectively nearby. "Harper," Daniel called, approaching carefully. "Everything all right?" "Fine," she said, not taking her eyes off Vincent. "Vincent was just leaving, right, Vincent?" "Actually," Vincent said, turning his attention to Daniel with practiced ease, "I was hoping to speak with whoever runs this place. You must be Whitmore. I've read a lot about you. Read about how you've taken my niece under your wing. Very generous of you. Very kind. Mr. Whitmore is busy," Harper said sharply, stepping between them. But Vincent ignored her, focusing entirely on Daniel. "See, here's the situation. I'm family. Harper's actual blood family. Her father's brother, and I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about family responsibilities, about how a child shouldn't be living in some facility, no matter how nice. She should be with family, real family, people who actually care about her because of who she is, not because of some project or publicity." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Harper said flatly, her voice steel. "Sweetheart, you don't understand yet. I know your dad had his problems. I know things fell apart after your mom died, but I've got my life together now. Good job at a warehouse, steady paycheck, nice apartment over in Riverside, 2 bedrooms. I can give you a real home, real family, not this institutional setup." Daniel stepped forward carefully, reading Harper's body language, seeing the fear she was trying to hide behind anger. "I think Harper's made her feelings clear. She's happy here. This is her home." Vincent's expression hardened, the false warmth evaporating. "With all due respect, Mr. Whitmore, you're not her guardian.
You don't have any legal standing here. I'm blood family. The law cares about that. Blood rights trump good intentions. My lawyer's already looking into the situation. I think we both know how this is likely to play out in family court. Then we'll go to court, Daniel said quietly, and we'll let Harper tell the judge what she wants. She's 11 years old. The court will do what's in her best interest, and her best interest is being with family. Vincent looked at Harper, his smile returning but still not touching his eyes. I'll be back, sweetheart, with the proper paperwork. We'll get this sorted out legally. Make sure you're in the right place. After he left, Harper sat on a garden bench, her hands shaking. All the confidence and self-possession she'd built over the past months temporarily shattered. Zoe sat on one side of her, Marcus on the other, both silent but present. He doesn't want me, Harper said, her voice small in a way Daniel had never heard before. He wants what I represent, access to Haven maybe, media attention. Maybe he thinks he can sue you for money, or get some kind of settlement, but he doesn't want me. Where was he when I was 8 years old sleeping under bridges? Where was he when I was running from foster homes? Where was he any of the past 5 years? Daniel sat down across from her, giving her space but staying close. We won't let him take you, I promise. You can't promise that. You can't stop him. The law cares about blood. I've been through this before in foster care. Family always wins, even when family is toxic, or dangerous, or hasn't been around in years. The system always chooses reunion over safety, always. Then we'll fight it. We'll get the best lawyers. We'll document everything, his absence, his timing, his obvious motivation. We'll have people testify about how well you're doing here, about what Haven means to you. I don't want to be fought over, Harper interrupted, her voice breaking. I don't want to be a case or a cause or a legal battle. I don't want my whole life laid out in court for people to judge and analyze. I just want to be left alone to live my life. Why can't people just leave me alone? That night, Harper disappeared. Daniel realized she was gone when she didn't show up for Sunday dinner, the one tradition she never missed. Her room was empty, her few belongings gone, no note left behind, just absence where presence had been.
Panic set in immediately. Not the professional, managed concern of a facility director, the deep visceral terror of someone who'd already lost one child and couldn't bear to lose another. The feeling of Emma all over again, the helplessness, the fear, the desperate need to fix something that might not be fixable. Diane organized staff to search the neighborhood. Other Haven residents spread out across the city, checking the parks and libraries and 24-hour restaurants where Harper had spent time before Haven existed. Daniel called every contact he had, police, social workers, advocates, knowing that officially reporting a runaway would bring the system crashing and might give Vincent ammunition, but unable to care about anything except finding her. He found her 2 days later at the old warehouse on Grant Street, sitting on the same concrete ledge where he'd first come looking for her 9 months ago. She was reading the same water-damaged paperback, eating from a can of cold soup, looking exactly like she had that first morning, except now she looked smaller somehow, like the past months at Haven had started to fill her out, and now she was shrinking back into survival mode. I knew you'd find me, she said when he sat down beside her, not looking up from her book. Why did you leave? Harper was quiet for a long moment. Because Vincent's gonna make this ugly, really ugly. He's gonna drag you through court, make up lies about inappropriate relationships or exploitation or whatever will stick. He's gonna turn Haven into a scandal. And I don't want that. Haven isn't supposed to be about me. It's supposed to be about all the kids, all the ones still coming. I can't be the reason it fails. Haven exists because of you. You're not separate from it. You're the heart of it. Then the heart can leave so the body survives. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were haunted. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I realized, maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should have stayed invisible, stayed in the background. Then Haven could just be this great place you built, and nobody would question it. But I had to go and be front and center in all the articles, had to make it about me, and now Vincent sees an opportunity and it's all gonna fall apart. That's not true. None of that is true, isn't it? He's right about one thing. You don't have legal standing. You're not my guardian. We never made it official because we were both pretending that somehow my informal status would work forever. But it won't. The system is coming, and the system always chooses blood. Daniel sat with that truth for a moment, because it was true. They'd been existing in a gray area justified by Haven's non-profit status and Harper's role as consultant rather than resident. But legally, she was still a child in need of a guardian, and Vincent was family making a claim. Then we make it official, Daniel said. I'll petition for guardianship, we'll go through the proper legal process, make it real, you do that. Take on legal responsibility for a messed up homeless kid you barely know. Harper, I've known you for 9 months, I've worked with you every day. I've seen you design a building, mentor other kids, keep adults honest, build a community from scratch. I've seen more of who you are than most parents see of their kids in years. And yes, I'd be honored to be your legal guardian, if you want that. Harper was quiet, tears streaming down her face now, months of held-back emotion finally breaking through. I've never had anyone want to be legally responsible for me. Foster parents got paid. Vincent wants access, but you just do it. Because you want to, because I care about you. Because you changed my life, because Emma would have loved you, and honoring her memory means protecting the people who remind me why life matters. I'm not your daughter, I can't replace Emma. I know that. I'm not asking you to be Emma. I'm asking if you want to let me be your guardian. Your legal official, documented guardian. Someone who can stand up to Vincent and anyone else who tries to hurt you. Harper threw her arms around him, this child who'd been so careful about boundaries and distance, who'd maintained her independence so fiercely. Yes, God, yes, please. The custody petition was filed in early November. Vincent immediately countered with his own filing, claiming that as blood family with no criminal record, he had superior rights to Daniel, a man with no biological or legal connection to Harper. The legal battle that followed was exactly as ugly as Harper had feared. Vincent's lawyer painted a picture of a vulnerable child being manipulated by a wealthy man with unclear motives. They questioned Daniel's relationship with Harper, suggested inappropriate attachment, implied that Haven was cover for something darker. They pulled out every stereotype about rich men and young girls, every insinuation that would make a judge uncomfortable. They presented Daniel's wealth as evidence of his ability to control and manipulate. This is a man worth over $200 million, Vincent's lawyer said during the preliminary hearing. He has unlimited resources to make himself look good, to make this facility look good. But what does he really want with this child? Why is an 11-year-old girl so central to his life? Why does he spend so much time with her? What kind of man builds his whole identity around one homeless child, unless there's something wrong with him? Daniel's lawyer countered with testimonies from Haven residents, from social workers who'd witnessed Harper's transformation, from the architects and contractors who'd seen her genuine role in creating the space, from teachers at her school who could speak to how well she was doing. They documented Vincent's complete absence from Harper's life for 5 years, his sudden interest only after Haven gained media attention and national coverage. But the real turning point came when Harper herself took the stand. The judge, a woman named Patricia Reyes with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, asked her directly, "Harper, can you tell me in your own words what you want?" Harper stood. They'd offered her a chair but she'd refused it, wanting to face the judge directly. "I want to stay with Mr. Whitmore at Haven. I want him to be my legal guardian." Why? Because he's the first adult in my life who listened to me instead of telling me who I should be. Because he built Haven with me, not for me. Because when Vincent showed up after 5 years, Mr. Whitmore asked me what I wanted instead of making decisions for me. Because he respects me, respects my choices even when they're messy or not what he'd pick for me. But Mr. Walsh is your blood uncle. Doesn't family matter to you? Family matters a lot, Harper said, her voice steady. But family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up, who are there when things are hard, not just when there's something in it for them. Mr. Whitmore has been there every day for 9 months. He's been at my school conferences. He's helped me with homework. He's taught me about budgets and nonprofits and how to run an organization. He's made me part of decisions about Haven instead of just putting my face on marketing materials. She paused, looking directly at Vincent. Where was my uncle when I was 8 years old and my mom died? Where was he when my dad started using drugs? Where was he when I ended up in foster care? Where was he when I ran away and lived under bridges? Where was he any single day of the past 5 years? Vincent's lawyer objected. Your Honor, the witness is being argumentative. I'll allow it. Judge Reyes said. This child's preferences are central to this case. Continue Harper. He wasn't there, Harper continued. Not once, not ever. He didn't come looking for me. He didn't try to help. He didn't care. And I know why he's here now. He read about Haven in magazines. He saw my picture. He figured there might be money involved, or publicity, or access to Mr. Whitmore's wealth. But he doesn't want me. He wants what he thinks I'm connected to. Those are serious allegations, the judge said. Do you have any evidence of that? Just logic. If he cared about me as family, he would have shown up before the magazine articles, before the publicity, when I actually needed family. Harper's voice cracked slightly. I don't think family is just about blood. I think it's about who you choose to show up for. And Vincent never chose me. Mr. Whitmore did. The courtroom was silent. Even Vincent's lawyers seemed at a loss for words. Mr. Walsh, Judge Reyes said, turning to Vincent, what do you say to these allegations? Vincent stood, adjusting his tie, trying to look sincere. Your Honor, I admit I wasn't there in the past. I have my own struggles, my own problems I was dealing with. But I'm clean now. I have a stable job, a stable home. I want to make amends for not being there before. I want to give my niece the family she deserves. Why now? The judge asked bluntly. Why after 5 years of no contact? Because I saw her picture in the magazine, because I realized she was alive and safe when I'd been worried. You were worried. Harper's voice cut through his explanation. You were worried but never called police, never filed a missing persons report, never asked social services where I was, never tried to find me even once in 5 years. Harper, don't call me that like we know each other. We don't. You're a stranger who happens to share DNA with my dead father. That's all. The hearing lasted 3 more hours. Testimony from social workers about the challenges of family reunification, expert witnesses on child welfare, psychologists discussing attachment and trauma. But everyone in that courtroom knew the decision would come down to Judge Reyes's interpretation of one question: what was truly in Harper's best interest? The ruling came 2 weeks later. Judge Reyes granted Daniel temporary guardianship, citing Harper's clearly stated preferences, her age and maturity level, Vincent's documented absence from her life, the lack of any prior relationship to build upon, and the obvious timing of his custody claim corresponding with media coverage of Haven. This court recognizes, Judge Reyes wrote in her decision, that family is important. Blood relationships matter. However, this court also recognizes that an 11-year-old child who has survived years of homelessness and multiple failed placements has earned the right to be heard. Harper Walsh has stated clearly and consistently that she wants to remain with Mr. Whitmore at Haven. She has articulated sound reasons for this preference, and this court finds no evidence that her preference stems from manipulation or undue influence. The decision continued. Mr. Walsh's sudden interest in custody, appearing only after his niece gained media attention and became associated with a well-funded non-profit organization, raises legitimate questions about his motivations. His 5-year absence from Harper's life, during which he made no documented effort to locate her or participate in her care, undermines his claims of familial concern. Accordingly, this court grants temporary guardianship to Daniel Whitmore, with a review hearing in 6 months to assess the arrangement's suitability. Mr. Walsh's petition for custody is denied without prejudice, meaning he may refile if circumstances significantly change. When Daniel called to tell her, Harper was at school, Daniel at his office, she cried. Actually cried, something she rarely allowed herself to do. Thank you, she said through tears. Thank you for fighting for me, for letting me have a voice. Thank you for using it, Daniel said, his own voice thick with emotion. For being brave enough to stand up in court and speak your truth. That evening Haven threw an impromptu celebration. Not for the legal victory necessarily, but for Harper, for her courage, for her voice, for her refusal to let someone else write her story. Zoe made a speech, standing on a chair in the common room so everyone could see her. When I first got here, I didn't believe any of this was real. I thought it was some scam, some too good to be true setup that would reveal itself as bullshit eventually. But watching Harper fight for this place, fight for herself, fight for all of us really, that's when I knew it was real. Because you don't fight that hard for something fake. You don't stand up in court and tell a judge exactly what you think unless you really believe in what you're protecting.
Marcus added his own perspective. Harper taught me that family is about choice. I still miss my parents. I still hope I'll see them again someday. But while I'm waiting, I have family here. People who chose me and I chose back. That's real too. That counts too. Other residents shared similar sentiments, each one finding their own words for what Haven meant. What Harper had shown them was possible. Daniel stood off to the side, watching Harper accept awkward hugs and genuine thanks from kids who saw her as one of them. Someone who understood, who'd been there, who'd built something real out of shared struggles instead of savior complexes. "You did good," Diane said, appearing at his elbow with 2 glasses of sparkling cider for the toast. "We did good," Daniel corrected. "All of us, but especially her. She's remarkable. You know that, right? What she did in that courtroom. Most adults couldn't handle that kind of pressure. She's stronger than most adults I know. Stronger than me, that's for sure. Maybe, but you gave her a platform to be strong from, safety to speak from. That matters too." The celebration continued late into the evening. Pizza and ice cream, a movie marathon, card games and laughter. For a few hours the kids at Haven were just kids, not survivors or victims or case files, just young people celebrating a win for one of their own. November brought cold and rain, and with them the first real test of Haven's principles. A city inspector showed up unannounced in early December, clipboard in hand, face set in skeptical lines that made clear she expected to find violations. Her name was Margaret Moore, 15 years with the Department of Children and Family Services, and she'd seen every kind of youth facility imaginable. She'd investigated places that looked perfect on paper but were nightmares behind closed doors. She'd shut down operations that violated safety codes or mistreated residents. And she'd read the glowing press about Haven with profound skepticism. In her experience, places that looked too good to be true usually were. "I'm here for an inspection," she announced when Diane answered the door. "Unscheduled, as is my right under Section 402.3 of the State Youth Housing Regulations." "Of course," Diane said calmly. "Let me get Daniel, and Harper, she'll want to be part of this." Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Harper, the 11-year-old resident, why would a child be part of an official inspection?" "Because she helped design this place, because she knows the principles it's built on better than anyone. Because we don't make decisions about Haven without including the people who live here." The inspection lasted 4 hours. Margaret examined every room, tested every safety feature, reviewed every document, interviewed staff and residents separately. She looked for the hidden rules that always emerged, the control mechanisms that every facility inevitably implemented, the ways power dynamics played out when no one was watching. What she found confused her. "These bedrooms don't lock from the outside," she noted. "Correct," Harper confirmed, showing her around. "Only from the inside. People need to feel safe, not trapped." "But how do you prevent residents from engaging in inappropriate activities? How do you supervise?" "We don't supervise bedrooms. They're private spaces. If someone wants privacy, they get privacy. As long as they're not hurting anyone or destroying property, what they do in their room is their business." Margaret made a note. "And the kitchen is accessible 24 hours. Yes, people eat when they're hungry, not when a schedule says they should. Plus cooking is therapeutic. Plus it teaches life skills. Plus it's cheaper than hiring staff to cook every meal. But the safety issues, knives, hot stoves, the risk of fires, we teach people how to use knives safely. How to cook without burning the place down. We treat them like capable human beings instead of problems to control. And yes, sometimes mistakes happen, but that's life, that's learning." Margaret interviewed Zoe without staff present. "Do you feel safe here, safer than anywhere I've been? Are there consequences if you break rules?" "Depends. If you hurt someone or steal their stuff or destroy property, yeah, there are consequences. We talk about it as a group. Figure out how to make things right, but it's not like punishment, it's more like accountability. Making amends. What if you want to leave? I pack my stuff and go. That's it. Nobody can force me to stay. Really, even though you're 14 and technically should be in a supervised placement. Haven isn't technically anything, it's just a place to live. If I leave, they'll worry about me. They'll make sure I have somewhere safe to go if I want help. But they won't force me to stay or call the cops on me or treat me like a runaway criminal." Margaret interviewed Marcus. Do you attend school regularly? Yes, ma'am. Every day. Who makes sure you get there? I make sure. It's my education. I care about it. But what if you didn't want to go? What if you just stayed home? Then someone would ask me why. Not in a mean way. Just like, hey, what's going on? Can we help? But they wouldn't force me. They'd try to understand what was making school hard and help me solve that problem. The more Margaret investigated, the more confused she became. This place violated every assumption she had about how youth facilities needed to operate. And yet, the kids seemed genuinely happy, genuinely safe, genuinely engaged in their own lives, rather than just surviving until they aged out. Finally, at the end of the inspection, she sat down with Daniel and Harper in the office. I don't know what to make of this place, she admitted. Everything I've been trained to look for, strict supervision, clear rules, measurable outcomes, behavior management systems, you don't have. And yet the kids seem fine, better than fine, happy, even. That's because we trust them, Harper said simply. We assume they're capable unless they prove otherwise, instead of assuming they're problems unless they prove they're fixed. But my job is to ensure safety, and safety requires oversight, structure, control. Does it? Daniel asked. Or does safety require respect, trust, dignity? The assumption that people will generally do the right thing if you give them the conditions to do so. Margaret shook her head. I honestly don't know. This goes against everything I've been taught about child welfare, everything I've seen work, or fail to work in 2 decades of doing this job. What does your gut tell you? Harper asked. Not your training, not the regulations, your actual human gut. Do the kids here seem safe, cared for, respected? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she finally admitted. They do. I've interviewed dozens of kids in dozens of facilities. These kids are different. They're more engaged, more honest, more themselves, less traumatized by the system supposed to help them. Then trust that, Harper said. Trust what you're actually seeing instead of what you think you should be seeing. The inspection report filed 2 weeks later was glowing. Margaret Moore documented everything that made Haven unusual, then concluded, while this facility operates outside traditional models of youth residential care, this inspector finds no evidence of harm or neglect. On the contrary, residents appear to be thriving in ways rarely seen in traditional placements. Recommend continued operation with follow-up inspection in 6 months. But Margaret included a note in her personal file, one that wouldn't be made public. This place either represents the future of youth care, or it's an unsustainable experiment that will fail as soon as something goes wrong. Time will tell. But I hope it's the former, because we desperately need a different model than what we've been doing. Something did go wrong in mid-December. A massive storm hit the city, ice, snow, winds that knocked out power across 3 counties. Haven lost electricity on a Thursday evening, temperature dropping rapidly, backup generator providing only minimal heat and light. For most of the kids, darkness and cold triggered trauma. Carmen started hyperventilating, memories of nights huddled in inadequate clothing flooding back. Alex retreated to his room, unreachable. 2 of the younger residents cried, wanting parents who weren't coming. Harper stepped into the crisis with calm she'd learned from years of managing survival situations. She gathered everyone in the common room, where they could pool body heat and support each other. She found candles and flashlights, creating warm light instead of harsh emergency lighting. She organized people to cook everything in the refrigerator before it spoiled, turning potential waste into a feast. And then she did something Daniel never would have thought of. She started telling stories. When I was 9, Harper said, her voice carrying in the candlelit darkness, I spent 2 weeks living in a library. During the day I'd read and look like a student. At night after closing, I'd hide in the bathroom until the staff left, then come out and sleep in the children's section. It was warm, it was safe, there were books everywhere. Best 2 weeks of homelessness I ever had. Zoe laughed despite her fear. How did you not get caught? Almost did twice. But librarians are nice people. Even when they found me, they didn't call the cops. They just asked if I was okay, offered to help, let me leave on my own. Other kids started sharing their own stories, not just trauma, but moments of resilience, unexpected kindness, victories however small. The darkness stopped being threatening and became intimate, a space for truth-telling and connection.
Daniel sat in the back watching Harper transform crisis into community, watching her use her own survival skills to help others survive their fear. This was what Haven was supposed to be. Not a place where adults managed problems, but a place where young people drew on their own strength and each other's support. The power came back 2 days later. By then the kids had discovered they could handle hard things. That darkness wasn't the same as danger, that they had each other, and that was enough. That was the most important test, Harper said to Daniel as they cleaned up candles and reorganized after the storm. Not the inspection, that was easy. We just had to be ourselves. But the power outage, that showed whether this community we've built is real, whether people actually care about each other, or if we're just individuals sharing space. And we passed. People showed up for each other. Nobody ran, nobody fell apart, well, not completely. We made it through together. Because of you, because of us. I started it, but everyone contributed. That's what community means. Haven's first anniversary fell on a June day that mirrored the opening, warm and bright, full of promise and possibility. The city had bloomed into summer, flowers in the garden that residents had planted and tended, new life everywhere. Daniel had planned a simple celebration, just residents and core staff and a few close supporters. But the kids had different ideas. We want to create something permanent, Zoe announced at a house meeting 2 weeks before the anniversary. Something that shows what this place means. Something that'll be here years from now. After much discussion they settled on a memory wall, not a memorial to the past, but a living testament to everyone who'd passed through Haven's doors. A place where people could leave their mark, claim their space in the story, acknowledge their journey. The wall went up in the main common room, painted deep purple like twilight by residents and volunteers working together. Diane commissioned a local artist to create a frame for it, carved with words from Harper's opening day speech. You don't have to be fixed to deserve safety. You just have to be human. On anniversary day they provided paint markers in every color imaginable and invited everyone connected to Haven to add to it. Residents current and past, staff, volunteers, donors, supporters, even skeptics who'd come around. Daniel watched the wall slowly fill with messages, names, handprints, drawings, quotes, parents thanking Haven for giving their kids stability when the system had failed them. Volunteers sharing what they'd learned about letting go of control and trusting young people. Residents writing hopes for the future, gratitude for the present, acknowledgement of how far they'd traveled from where they'd started. Jordan, who'd moved out 3 months ago into his own apartment but still visited weekly, wrote, Haven taught me that home isn't a place you find. It's a place you build, one small choice at a time. Carmen added, for the first time someone asked what I needed instead of telling me what I should want. That changed everything. Alex's contribution was musical notes, the melody of the first song he'd written at Haven, now painted permanently on the wall. Harper stood next to Daniel, her own message already on the wall in careful letters. Home is where someone listens. Thank you for hearing me. You should add something, she said to Daniel. I don't know what to write. Whatever Haven means to you, whatever brought you here. Daniel thought about the past year, about how completely it had changed him, transformed him from someone who measured worth in dollars to someone who understood that value came from connection, from showing up, from choosing people over profit. He thought about his daughter Emma, about grief that had nearly destroyed him, about how Harper had somehow helped him carry that grief by giving him purpose larger than his pain. He picked up a marker and wrote Emma Whitmore, forever loved, forever missed, forever the reason I learned to see. Then below it, Harper Walsh, forever brave, forever wise, forever the teacher I needed. And finally, this is what redemption looks like. Not fixing the past, but building a different future. As afternoon faded into evening, the wall became a tapestry of stories, a mosaic of connection and transformation and hope. Proof that Haven had grown beyond its origins into something belonging to everyone who'd walked through its doors. The formal celebration that evening was small but profound. Daniel thanked everyone who'd made Haven possible, his voice breaking when he talked about Harper's courage in court, her wisdom in building community, her insistence on doing things differently even when different was harder. Harper spoke about what home meant when you'd spent years without one. Home isn't perfect, she said. We've had fights here, we've had failures, we've had people leave and people struggle and moments where I wasn't sure this would work. But home means you belong even when you're struggling, even when you're not at your best, even when you make mistakes. That's what Haven gave me. Permission to be imperfect and still worthy of safety. Several residents shared their own stories, voices growing stronger as they spoke, taking ownership of their experiences in ways they couldn't have a year ago. But the most powerful moment came from someone unexpected. Margaret Moore, the inspector who'd been so skeptical, stood up to speak. "I've been doing this job for 17 years, she said. "I've seen every kind of youth facility, the ones that look perfect and hide abuse, the ones that mean well but fail anyway, the ones that follow every rule and still crush kids' spirits, and I've never not once seen anything like Haven." She paused, looking around the room. "When I first inspected this place, I thought you were naive, dangerously idealistic. I thought you'd fail as soon as things got hard. I filed my report saying you were doing well but stayed privately convinced it wouldn't last. But I kept checking in, kept watching, and I've seen this place weather storms, literal and metaphorical. I've seen kids come here broken and leave whole. I've seen community built from nothing. I've seen what's possible when we trust young people instead of trying to fix them." She looked directly at Harper. "You were right. Safety doesn't come from control. It comes from respect, from dignity, from the revolutionary act of believing people are capable until they prove otherwise. Haven has taught me more about youth care than my entire career taught me. Thank you for that." The room erupted in applause. Margaret Moore sat down, wiping tears, having said what she'd come to say. Later, after the formal program ended and people mingled over cake and conversation, Daniel found Harper sitting on the front steps, looking out at the street where kids played in the summer twilight. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually built something that works. Something real. Something that'll last beyond us." "You built it," Daniel corrected gently. "I just funded it and tried not to screw up your vision too badly." "No, we built it together. That's important. You brought resources I didn't have. I brought knowledge you didn't have. Neither of us could have done it alone. That's the whole point. Real change happens when people with different kinds of power choose to work together with genuine respect." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood settle into evening routines, lights coming on in houses, families gathering for dinner, normal life continuing around them, while inside Haven, kids who'd survived impossible things found moments of peace. "Daniel," Harper said after a while, "yeah, thank you for being the kind of person who changed when someone showed you a different way. Most people can't do that. Can't let go of their assumptions and really listen. But you did. You let a homeless kid teach you how to see the world differently. That takes real courage." Daniel felt tears prick his eyes for probably the 10th time that day. "Thank you for being the kind of person who gives away their last $3 to a stranger, for having the courage to help someone even when you needed help yourself. You started all of this, Harper. That night on the bus, that one small act of kindness, everything grew from that." Harper smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder in a gesture that still felt new, still felt like trust being offered and accepted. "Best $3 I ever spent. Best investment either of us ever made." They remained there as darkness fell completely, watching fireflies blink in the garden, hearing laughter and music from inside the house. Two people from completely different worlds who'd built a bridge between them, a bridge that dozens of others had now crossed, finding safety on the other side. The memory wall inside held hundreds of stories, but the truest one remained the simplest. A venture capitalist lost everything in a parking garage mugging, and a homeless child gave him more than bus fare. She gave him purpose, direction, and a chance to build something that would outlast them both. A place where being human was enough, where kindness counted more than credentials, where every person who walked through the door heard the words they'd been waiting their whole lives to hear: "Welcome to Haven. You belong here, exactly as you are." And in the end, as fireflies danced and summer settled warm around them, that was the only story that truly mattered. Not the story of one person saving another, but the story of people choosing each other, building together, creating from their combined brokenness something whole and good and real. Something called home.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.